New York Dolls' classic lineup ended in a trailer park in Florida in early April of 1975. The band was on tour of Florida that was organized by Mclaren with new outfits created by Vivian Westwood. The band's new comic chic gimmick, however, wouldn't fly in the South, so they ditched them and would wear army surplus clothes instead. The band would stay in Crystal Springs, Florida, in a trailer park where Jerry Nolan's mother lived. Peter Jordan, Arthur Kane's bassist stand-in and roadie, who was fired by Mclaren before the tour of the South began, was rehired when Kane's alcohol use was affecting his playing. In an interview for Nina Antonia's definitive book about the New York Dolls, Too Much Too Soon, Jordan had this to say about the band's trailer park headquarters. When I say a trailer court, you would be hard-pressed to visualize this in England, but it was definitely from the wildest film noir fantasy. Jerry's mother and stepfather were living in a frame house, and they had a trailer park with 8 of these little trailers that looked like grasshoppers without legs, set around a court, and that was it. After being there for a few days, I couldn't take it anymore. I met a girl. I wanted to stay in a house with air conditioning. I didn't want to sleep next to Arthur. He was a drying out alcoholic in a trailer with no air conditioning, and then have to eat dinner in Jerry Nolan's mother's house. I wanted to stay with this girl in her air-conditioned house, smoke pot, and then meet them at the club whenever we had a show. Sylvain Sylvain said Jerry's mother had gotten married to this really hick, abusive Yankee husband, and he had a motel made out of trailers. And this is where the dolls were staying, being hung up on heroin and needing booze and not getting along in 105-degree weather. It was horrible. We were playing these little key clubs. It's like the Blues Brothers when they have to go out and play in front of the good old boys with chicken wire on the stage. That's the kind of place we were effing playing. 2 horse users, Johnny Thunders and Jerry Nolan, were unable to score some H after their local connection got arrested, and the 2 were getting strung out and fiending. The night the New York Dolls' classic lineup broke up was at a dinner in the trailer park that Mrs. Nolan was hosting. According to Sylvain Sylvain, we were sitting around eating by the grace of Jerry's mother. We couldn't afford S, because we're only making $100 a gig, and Johnny and Jerry were really getting bad. Those poor guys, they were sick and getting sicker because they didn't have anything, and I was getting itchy myself when Johansen goes crazy in front of Jerry's mother and starts with, "I'm sick and tired of this. Everyone is replaceable. I'm sick and tired of trying," and then he begins to verbally chastise the other band members. Jerry said, I got up and said, "I'm out." Jerry got up and said, "If Jerry's leaving, I'm too." And they both left to go back to their trailer. David Johansen recalls the breakup of the Dolls and said, "They were jonesing, but we had these gigs that we wanted to do. They weren't great, but it was a life. And we don't want to do these gigs. We want to go back to New York and rehearse." I was like, "Rehearse what? We play every effing day." It just got to a point, if you guys are going to split, then F it, It was the end of the run. If we had been a big hit and we were making lots of money, we could have probably kept it together, but it was really just us at that point. Arthur Kane could only watch as the band split right before his eyes. He would later say, "I was shocked when Johnny and Jerry cut out because, to tell the truth, if I had been interested in heroin, I would have gone with them." Johnny and Jerry had this little club going with Richard Hell, the bassist from television, who used to tell them how wonderful and influential heroin was. You could hang out at Edgar Allan Poe's apartment on heroin. Johnny and Jerry were driven to the airport by Sylvain, and before they boarded their plane back to New York City, Sylvain asked them, "What about the New York Dolls?" Jerry replied, "F the Dolls." Malcolm Mclaren, who was also there witnessing the events unfolding, said, "It was all a bit sad. It was only noble Sylvain who still wanted to pursue it, and dearest Arthur, who was in hell." Blackie Guzman was brought in to take over Johnny Thunder's guitar spot for the last 3 dates of the Florida tour. He had this to say about his brief time as a member in an interview with Sounds magazine in 1983. "Having known the members of the band, I waltzed right into the situation, a 20-year-old babe in arms, completely inexperienced. But it didn't take long. Baptism by fire. By the time I got into the New York Dolls, the band was on its last legs. They were struggling for existence. It was virtually over by the time I joined. It was only completing a formality. Arthur Kane was given the band's amplifiers, and he decided to head out west with Blackie to form the band Killer Kane. He said, "I don't want to go back to New York after the failure of the Dolls. It's funny how these things change. You can be on top of the world, and 30 seconds later, someone else is the next big thing. And you get swept under." Disco music had gotten big as well, which was aggravating. I went to LA for about a year, had a group called Killer Kane, and I went back to New York. David Johansen flew back to New York and told everybody that the New York Dolls were finished, and he wanted nothing to do with Jerry Nolan and Johnny Thunders. Malcolm Mclaren and Sylvain Sylvain would take the band's rented station wagon and head out west to New Orleans. Malcolm said, "It was wonderful. We saw all these old rock and roll guys singing in bars like Clarence Frogman Henry and the Coasters. I had a great time, but I caught a venereal disease, which was awful. It was the first time I'd ever done such a thing. I felt really awful and ashamed, but I didn't mind it. It was part of the rock and roll lifestyle, and I was happy to drive all the way back with Sylvain to New York." Sylvain Sylvain, who was uncertain about his future in music at the time, listened to Malcolm talk about these kids who hung around his shop and that wanted to be in a band. He said, "We were running around New Orleans, and he told me not to worry about that stuff. He said he knew these kids that used to hang around his shop and that I could put together a band with them and teach them. Not to take off from the Dolls, but to start something new. I was into it up to the point of giving him my Les Paul guitar and electric piano. Then he was going to send me a ticket to London. I even wrote out funny receipts so customs wouldn't bust him." Malcolm would later sell the electric piano, but gave the guitar to Steve Jones, one of the kids who hung around his shop. He learned how to play it before he became a guitarist for the Sex Pistols. The band's roadie and fill-in bassist, Peter Jordan, was given a plane ticket home, but he cashed his in and hitchhiked his way back to New York City. A few days after quitting the Dolls, Thunders and Nolan met with their buddy Richard Hell, who left his band he was in, Television, to form the Heartbreakers on April 11, 1975. A few months later, David Johansen, Sylvain Sylvain, and Peter Jordan were organized a new New York Dolls lineup in July to tour Japan in August, after a Japanese promoter and huge fan of the band gave them a lot of money to reform and play in a series of rock and roll festivals overseas. I hope you have enjoyed this episode of Cuppy's Music Curios. My name is Cuppy, and I hope to see you soon. Cheerio!